The stars above Earth did not twinkle. They watched. Jonny Chance stood on the rusted balcony of his family's HAB unit in Sector 4. Looking up at a sky choked with the orange glow of atmospheric filters. At 17, his body was already a map of scar tissue. Burns from the acid rain of his first decade. The jagged line across his ribs from a feral hound encounter at 12. And the constellation of small white dots along his forearm from the venomous glassworms that nested in the ruins of old Detroit. Earth. Class 12 Death World. The classification was not a warning. It was an obituary. Most humans who survived to adulthood on Earth did so through a combination of stubbornness, paranoia, and a genetic lottery that favored the fast and the ruthless. Jonny had all three, but he had something else too. He had the kind of mind that saw patterns in chaos, that noticed the way the wind shifted before a toxin storm, that calculated angles and leverage and timing the way other kids calculated odds of surviving another year. He would need it. Tomorrow, a shuttle would descend through the atmospheric shield. It would carry representatives of the Galactic Education Academy. And it would take with it a handful of Earth's brightest and strongest. 117 children had qualified. Jonny was ranked 4th. He did not intend to stay 4th. The morning of the selection, Jonny wore the standard-issue gray tunic that all candidates received. It was too large in the shoulders and too tight in the arms. A reminder that Earth children were built differently than the rest of the galaxy's youth. Compact. Dense. Wired with fast-twitch muscle fibers that made them exhausting to fight and impossible to ignore. The shuttle landed in what used to be Central Park. The ground there was still cracked concrete and twisted rebar. But the Academy's landing craft didn't care about aesthetics. It touched down with a whisper of ion drives and opened its maw like a metallic beast ready to swallow its young. Jonny stepped through the decontamination archway. Felt the sting of nanite scrubbers peeling away the last traces of Earth's biological hazards. And found himself in a corridor of impossible white. Everything about the Academy ship was clean. Sterile. Designed for species that had never had to worry about the air turning their lungs to fluid. He was directed to a processing hall where 116 other candidates stood in loose clusters, eyeing each other with the same wary calculation Jonny carried in his chest. He recognized a few faces from the qualification rankings. At the top was a girl from the Siberian enclaves, built like a winter wolf. Her pale eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing a herd. Jonny found a spot near the wall and waited. The instructor who addressed them was not human. He was a Veln. A species that resembled a stack of smooth river stones given mobility and voice. He spoke in tones that vibrated in Jonny's sternum. Welcome to the Galactic Education Academy. You are here because your homeworlds have identified you as exceptional. That designation means nothing to us. The Academy does not care where you come from. It cares only about what you can become. You will be tested in academics, in physical conditioning, and in combat readiness. The bottom 10% will be returned to their homeworlds within the first standard year. The top 10% will be fast-tracked to officer candidacy. The rest will graduate and serve. The Velm paused, and its body shifted like a landslide. You will find that this academy is not a school. It is a forge. We will heat you. We will hammer you. And if you are strong enough, you will emerge as something worthy of the stars. Jonny felt a slow smile creep across his face. He had been forged his entire life. Earth had been doing its best to break him since before he could walk. This was just a different kind of fire. The journey to the academy took 3 weeks in cryo-sleep. When Jonny woke, the ship had docked at a space station that orbited a gas giant of such violent beauty that he stood at the viewport for 10 minutes and simply stared. The planet was striped in violet and gold, its storms the size of continents. Its rings a shattered moon that refused to stop glittering. The academy itself was built into the station's outer shell. A sprawling complex of training grounds, lecture halls, simulation chambers, and dormitories designed to accommodate 3,000 species. Jonny saw creatures he had only read about in the xenobiology texts Earth managed to intercept. He saw aquatic beings floating in antigrav water spheres, silicon-based lifeforms that chimed when they moved, and things so alien his brain simply refused to categorize them. His dormitory was a small room with a narrow bed, a desk, and a viewport that looked out onto the gas giant. He dropped his single duffel bag on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and let himself breathe. Then the door slid open, and the mantis walked in. It was 7 feet tall, built like a praying mantis but with all the menace that name implied. Its exoskeleton was a deep, iridescent green, its compound eyes reflecting the violet light of the gas giant in 1,000 fractured images. Its forelimbs ended in curved blades that clicked softly against the doorframe. The creature spoke in a voice like grinding chitin. "So you are the human from the death world. I am Zervath of the Keth Swarm. I have heard that your kind is tough. I intend to test that hypothesis." Jonny stood slowly. He had encountered aggressive lifeforms before. The key was never to show fear and never to show weakness, but also never to escalate unless you were prepared to finish it. "Nice to meet you, Zervath. I'm Jonny Chance. And I'm sure we'll get along fine." Zervath's mandibles clicked, a sound Jonny would later learn was Keth for laughter. "We will see." The first week of the academy was a gauntlet designed to strip away every comfortable assumption the candidates had brought with them. Academic assessments revealed that Earth's education system, desperate and underfunded as it was, had produced students who were brilliant at improvisation but terrible at standard theory. Jonny scored in the top 15% in mathematics and tactical reasoning but failed his first xenopolitical history exam spectacularly because he had never heard of the Treaty of Seven Sectors. Physical conditioning was worse. The Academy's gravity was set to a standard 0.8, which should have made every Earthborn student feel light and powerful. But the training was not about strength. It was about endurance, flexibility, and the ability to function under conditions that simulated hostile environments. Jonny's body, built for sprinting and surviving, had to learn to pace itself. He finished last in the first endurance run and threw up in a waste receptacle afterward. But it was combat readiness that brought everything into focus. The Academy's sparring program was mandatory and merciless. Students were paired randomly and expected to fight 3 times a week. The rules were simple: no permanent injury, no weapons, and tap out when you were done. Most species treated sparring as a technical exercise, a way to practice forms and test reflexes. Jonny quickly learned that not everyone shared that perspective. His third sparring match was against Zervath, and the mantis had clearly been waiting for this moment. They faced each other in a hexagonal ring surrounded by transparent shielding. A referee drone hovered between them, its sensors calibrated to stop the match if vitals dropped below safe thresholds. Jonny wore the standard training GI, which felt absurdly thin against an opponent whose natural armor was rated to withstand small arms fire. Zervath did not bother with a bow or any other form of pre-fight ritual. He simply lunged, his forelimbs coming at Jonny in a blur of motion that would have bisected a lesser opponent. Jonny dropped, rolled, and came up on his feet. The mantis had speed, but it was linear. It attacked in straight lines, relying on the assumption that its targets would react in predictable ways. They did not circle each other for long. Zervath attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes and slashes that forced Jonny backward toward the edge of the ring. The mantis was fast and precise, and its blades left shallow cuts on Jonny's forearms that stung with every movement. Jonny's mind worked the way it always did in a crisis. He catalogued. He analyzed. He found the pattern. Zervath attacked from the right. Always the right. Its left limb was slightly shorter. A congenital defect or an old injury, Jonny didn't know which, but it mattered. The mantis compensated by shifting its weight forward before striking. A tiny tell that Jonny spotted on the third exchange. He let Zervath come. He let the mantis commit to a strike, and then he moved inside its guard. Earth children learn to fight in spaces too small to swing a weapon. They learn to grapple, to elbow, to knee, to bite if necessary. Jonny drove his shoulder into Zervath's thorax, wrapped his arms around one of the mantis's forelimbs, and twisted. The joint gave with a sickening pop. Zervath shrieked. A sound like metal tearing. It stumbled backward. Jonny did not let go. He followed the mantis down, mounted its chest, and drove his fist into the soft tissue just below the head. Once. Twice. 3 times. The referee drone flashed red and emitted a sharp tone. The match was over. Jonny stood, breathing hard. His GI torn and stained with his own blood in something green that he assumed was Keth hemolymph. He offered Zervath a hand up. The mantis ignored it, pushing itself upright with its remaining good limb. Its compound eyes fixed on Jonny with something that was not quite hatred and not quite respect. "You fight like a creature from a nightmare," it said. "I fight like someone from Earth," Jonny replied. "There's a difference." Word of the match spread quickly. By the end of the week, Jonny was known as the human who broke a Keth's arm. And the nickname followed him through the corridors of the academy like a shadow. Some students looked at him with fear. Others with curiosity. A few with the kind of wary respect that predators give to other predators. Zervath did not speak to him again. But Jonny noticed that the mantis always chose a seat on the opposite side of the lecture hall. It was not hostility. It was acknowledgement. The weeks turned into months, and Jonny found his rhythm. He improved in academics by applying the same obsessive pattern recognition that kept him alive on Earth. He learned xenopolitical history by mapping it onto the territorial conflicts he had witnessed between Earth's surviving city-states. He mastered astrophysics by relating it to the atmospheric dynamics of his homeworld. And he excelled in combat training because, for the first time in his life, he was in an environment where fighting was controlled, regulated, and safe. Safe. The word felt strange in his mouth. He made friends. Not many, but enough. There was a marine biologist from an ocean world who could hold her breath for 40 minutes and laughed at everything. There was an engineer from a low-gravity mining colony who built Jonny a custom grip strength trainer and asked more questions about Earth's geology than any human ever had. And there was a quiet girl from a diplomatic family who spoke 14 languages and never raised her voice but commanded every room she entered. They were his first real friends. On Earth, friendship was a liability. You didn't get close to people because people died. And the grief was a luxury that survivors couldn't afford. But the academy was not Earth. And Jonny was learning what it meant to be 17 without a knife under his pillow. The midterm combat assessments came in the 4th month. And they were designed to be humiliating. Students were thrown into simulation chambers that recreated hostile environments and forced to fight opponents who knew those environments better than they did. Jonny was dropped into a high-gravity chamber with a species that had evolved on a world twice as dense as Earth. He spent 20 minutes on his knees, gasping, before he figured out how to use the gravity to his advantage by turning every fall into a controlled impact and every impact into a strike. He passed. Barely. But he passed. After the assessment, his combat instructor, a scarred veteran of the border wars who had lost an eye and most of a leg, pulled him aside. "You fight like someone who expects to die," the instructor said. "It makes you fast. It makes you dangerous. But it also makes you predictable. Learn to fight like someone who intends to live. The two are not the same." Jonny thought about that for a long time. He thought about Earth, about the sky that never cleared, about the people he had known who had not survived to 17. He thought about the difference between surviving and living. And he realized that he had never really understood the distinction until now. He started fighting differently. Not softer, but smarter. He stopped treating every opponent as a threat and started treating them as a problem to be solved. He learned to read body language across a dozen species. To anticipate attacks before they came. To turn his opponent's strength against them with a minimum of effort. And he kept winning. By the end of his first year, Jonny Chance was ranked in the top 5% of his class. He had not been returned to Earth. He had not been fast-tracked to officer candidacy, but he was close. And he had done something that no one, least of all himself, had expected. He had found a home. On his 18th birthday, he stood at the viewport of his dormitory and looked out at the gas giant. The storms were still raging, the rings were still glittering. And the universe was still vast and indifferent and beautiful. He thought about the boy who had stood on a rusted balcony in Sector 4. Looking up at a sky that choked him. Wondering if he would live to see 19. He had. And for the first time in his life, Jonny Chance was not just surviving. He was becoming something more. The academy had not broken him. It had not needed to. Earth had already done that work. And the academy had taken the broken pieces and rearranged them into something that could stand in the light. He smiled, turned away from the viewport, and went to class.